I want to talk a little bit about climate change now. And Toby, you've been an environmental campaigner through much of your career, and I know you're very close to the transition team. Obviously, of the many issues that have divided America in recent years, climate change is high up the list. The US is obviously now going to reaffirm its support for the Paris Agreement. But what do you think will be the policy changes we'll see as the administration aims for net zero?
Sure, Nick. Thank you. And might I say before answering that question that I'm sure that Senator Vitter and Senator Boxer, both of whom were House members, as I was, are flattered, as I am, by the presence today of fellow parliamentarians from the UK. Thank you for being part of this. Yes, Nick. No question. We'll get back to Paris, to the accord. I think far beyond that, however, and notwithstanding what David said, by the way, constraints on the presidency, we'll surprise the world, I think, in the next few years by what the Biden administration does on climate, way beyond just rejoining Paris. If you look at the transition team, and I've had some dealings with the transition team and some input over the even pre-election, you'll see groups like the Sunrise Movement very dominant on the transition team. The Sunrise Movement, as I think all of us know, is a very large and fast-growing grassroots movement of climate activists around the world. They're not just going to be window dressing. They're going to be right in the middle of this. There are already efforts underway that involve the incoming administration and thought leaders around the country and the world in terms of far-reaching initiatives on climate. And they involve everything from carbon taxes to compacts with major global companies, many of whom, by the way, are way ahead of where this Trump administration was on accepting climate as a real challenge and as a real thing, as opposed to denying it. So I expect a great deal of activity. The first order of business is to undo some of the damage that was done by Trump. And it was considerable. It has been considerable. You know, among the serious pieces of damage, of course, are things that we can't do anything about in the short term. 200 judges under the age of 50 from far-right backgrounds. We're not changing that. But in terms of things like the power plant rules, a lot of clean air related actions, and the gutting of environmental regulations, the administration is going to get to work on repairing a lot of that damage. And that's part of the foundation here for addressing climate change in a much more aggressive way. So I think we can look forward to that. Will there be bipartisanship on any of that? I think when it comes maybe to infrastructure, maybe not a Green New Deal, but a greenish kind of deal, and infrastructure, and Republican members see the possibilities for job creation in their districts. Maybe there might be some bipartisanship. And David's right about the slim margin in the House, but that can also work to the favor of the House majority and the Democrats and Speaker Pelosi, because there are, in fact, some members, House members, who are very vulnerable in the mid-year elections coming up on both sides of the aisle, but it might lead to some Republican support. And David mentioned the Senate races, and Nick asked about the Georgia races. I mean, either we're going to win both of those or we're going to lose both of those. I don't think there's going to be the kind of ticket splitting because the Republican candidates are not, you know, that they're not celebrity figures. So this is really going to be about taking the Senate back, and both sides will be motivated by that. But when you look at the map, 2 years hence, the Republicans have a very, very bad draw. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
We've obviously just touched on trade and the issue of tariffs, and international trade more broadly is is another big departure from the Trump administration. Toby, President Trump undermined the WTO. He dislikes multilateralism. He attacked trade deals with countries on the basis that they have lower labor costs. What does this mean for a Biden trade policy? Are we going to see a return to some of the big negotiations, like for the CPTPP, or maybe like a revived WTO, or are we likely to see a bit more caution than that? And obviously, from our parochial British perspective, do you think there'll be very much enthusiasm for a trade deal with Britain as we leave the European Union?
Well, Aaron and Barbara and David, I think all touched on this in a way. Biden's, it's been a long time since Joe, 20 years, I guess, right? Supported getting China into the WTO. I think if you ask Democrats who are in the trenches in this campaign, or even the last one, we learned a lot about anger over trade at the grassroots level. Maybe we haven't learned enough, and that's why I think it was Aaron who said, there's an increasing bipartisan agreement on the Chinese playing unfairly. So that's number one, and that's not going away. And President-elect Biden and his team are going to have to figure out how to manage that. Having said that, I had the pleasure of representing the biggest port in America for a period of time. And they were doing this was a year ago, they were doing an analysis, very professionally done research project on the impact of the Trump tariffs across this country, this vast country. There's not a congressional district of the 435 across our country that doesn't have a product that goes in or out of it every day that has come through or will go through the port of LA. That's how massive that port is in terms of American commerce. And what the study found was untold damage from this chaos and mayhem and ad hoc behavior, getting up in the morning and tweeting before his people at the USTR, the trade representative's office, even know that he's slapping tariffs on this country or that country. That's over. And it'll be in marked contrast to the last 4 years. And that has to be welcomed by everybody. This was just no way to run a government or a trade policy. So I think you're going to see, you mentioned the TPP, Nick. Don't think it was lost on the new administration, the incoming administration, this deal that was signed the other day by the Pacific countries. I mean, this is not something that we can just sit on the sidelines and tweet about. So yeah, I think there's going to be much more multinational, multilateral approach, a much calmer, a much more reasoned, less chaotic approach by this administration. And I think it'll be welcome on both sides of the aisle, even though some of the Republicans won't admit it. Nick, if I might just chime in on that, I don't think we should in any way underestimate the possibility and the potential of the business community, particularly large global companies, to push a climate agenda, not just to reluctantly climb on board. There are more and more, and I acknowledge many of them are in the tech sector, but there are other sectors as well. There are more and more CEOs. There are more and more board members of major global companies who have climate at the top of their agenda as a business proposition. So I don't think we should see this as Biden trying to get something done with the staunch, fierce opposition of big global companies. I think the world's changed in that regard. It's changed in our country. It's changed in the UK and elsewhere. I think this question is brilliant and very troubling because there's no easy answer here. These divisions are deep. The bitterness is beyond anything anybody's seen, at least in modern history. It's the same in the UK, I'm sure, at the local level. People not talking to each other anymore because of politics and so forth. So I don't think there's any easy answer, but I will say this, I do think that Biden's character helps with the healing. It's not an answer by any means. I mean, maybe the evangelicals will wake up and decide to be healers, as opposed to supporting divisive policies. But I'm not betting on it. Barbara, just want to add on that point. You know, there's in our media this morning, there were reports that President Trump was looking for options to attack Iran's nuclear facility. And what's so interesting and of course disturbing is that since he pulled us out of the deal, they've increased tenfold, 20-fold, whatever, what that deal was supposed to prevent from happening. So re-engaging in some fashion with Iran has got to be done because it relates to everything in the region. The Palestinians need some dignity back. They've been, obviously their leadership has not been perfect, but you know, you can't treat a people like this. And I think Biden knows that. And so we have to go back to some sort of two-state, strong US support, and not just sucking up to Likud no matter what they want to do in Israel. There are other places, by the way, that I think, you know, tangible, realistic progress is possible. Libya, the Trump administration has been basically absent from that whole process. We can fix that problem over a period of time. The Western Sahara, where violence is now flared, there's a deal waiting to be made there if the US and others, France particularly, but others, use their influence to get the parties to actually genuinely negotiate. Maybe, Aaron, I'm taking a little bit of exception to what you said because I'm a little more optimistic that there are Middle East accomplishments in the offing.